Hello and welcome to the EcoCast by Actual Tech Media, our first EcoCast of 2022, and we're talking about IT decisions, the tools that supercharge a Microsoft on-premises or Microsoft 365 Azure cloud environment. Thank you so much for joining us on the EcoCast by Actual Tech Media. On this event today, you'll hear from our experts at Duo, Rubric, Veeam, and Synology. Now, before we get started, there's just a few things that you should know about the event. My name is David Davis of Actual Tech Media, and I'll be serving as the moderator. We want these events to be educational. We encourage your questions on the EcoCast, and you can pose those questions there in the Questions tab of your audience console. We'll be taking your questions live after each presentation on the EcoCast today, so keep those questions coming. We even have a Best Question prize to help encourage your questions because we want to help to solve your technology challenges. We also have a number of resources available for download there in the Handouts tab. I encourage you to check those out. And then finally, we want this to be a social event as well. You can tweet directly from your audience console, and the hashtag for today, ATM EcoCast, will be automatically appended. And then finally, prizes. We have 3 Amazon $500 gift cards to give out live on the EcoCast today. Of course, you must be live in attendance to qualify. I'll be announcing the winners live throughout the presentation. As I mentioned, we also have our Best Question prize for an Amazon $50 gift card, but not just one for each of the 4 sessions on the event today. So like I said, keep those questions coming. You must ask a question to be entered into the prize drawing for the best question. And of course, all prize winners must meet the Actual Tech Media prize terms and conditions. You can find a link to those there in the Handouts tab. All grand prize winners must submit an IRS Form W-9 to Actual Tech Media. And of course, you always have the option to make a donation to our selected charities that you see on the screen. Over the years, we've donated thousands of dollars to charities, thanks to generous prize winners such as yourselves who win a prize and choose to donate that prize to a charity. So thank you in advance if you choose to do so. The hashtag for today on Twitter is ATM EcoCast. And like I said, if you tweet directly from your audience console, that hashtag will be automatically appended. Of course, you can follow Actual Tech Media and me, your moderator, David M. Davis, over on Twitter as well, and subscribe to all the Actual Tech Media social channels there in your audience console. You'll find a link to our YouTube channel, Facebook, and the 10 on Tech podcast over in the iTunes store, as well as our LinkedIn page where we post all of our latest and greatest content. And now a couple of other resources I want to call your attention to before I introduce you to our keynote presenter. There's also a link in the Handouts tab to the Gorilla Guide Book Club. That's where you can download free, easy-to-read enterprise IT books authored by top industry experts. We're always posting new Gorilla Guides there. It's a great way to stay up to date on trending enterprise IT solutions. And yes, all Gorilla Guides are completely free. You can download those after the event as well if you point your web browser to gorilla.guide. And another great way to win Amazon gift cards is to refer an IT friend or coworker to the Actual Tech Media online event series, and you both could win an Amazon $300 gift card. We do those prize drawings each month, and we promise not to spam your IT friends or coworkers. We will send them an invitation to an upcoming list of events. If they don't respond, we'll send them one more reminder, and then we won't bother them after that. So if you enjoy the Actual Tech Media events, and hopefully you do, we encourage you to refer your IT friends or coworkers. You can do that there in the Handouts tab, or at the end of the event, you'll be automatically redirected to our Refer a Friend page. And with that, I'm excited now to introduce you to our keynote presenter, Mr. Scott Becker, moderator at Actual Tech Media and tech journalist for over 23 years covering Microsoft technologies. Scott will be talking about the top 10 hot items on the Microsoft roadmap for 2022. Scott, take it away.
Thanks, David. Over the next hour plus, you're going to hear from companies with really strong solutions for improving your Microsoft environment, especially in security and data protection. We're going to set that up with an overview of what to expect from Microsoft in terms of product and service releases over the year ahead. We're coming off a year, 2021, it was kind of a throwback for Microsoft. They had a lot of big tent on-premises releases. like the old days. You had Windows 11, and any year with a new client is a big deal. There was Windows Server 2022, and there were new subscription editions revealed for on-premises servers like SharePoint. There was one big release that wasn't a throwback, the Windows 365 and Cloud PC releases, which were highly anticipated moves into the desktop as a service world. But on the whole, 2021 was a big year for on-premises refreshes. 2022 looks more like the new Microsoft. This is a company that primarily sells services in the cloud and that updates those services on a rolling basis. Let's look at some of the updates that are coming. My favorite place to track those types of updates is on Microsoft's big roadmap sites. There's the Microsoft 365 roadmap, which you can see here. I hope this is big enough that you can make out these numbers. This page is currently covering 1,596 updates. So it's comprehensive and granular. Great place to keep up with your favorite cloud services from Microsoft. The other place I like to look is the Azure updates page here. It's a different format, but it's also pretty valuable. To get ready for this session, I basically scanned recent releases for anything that caught my eye and looked broadly interesting. If you're responsible for Microsoft Cloud services in your organization, I highly recommend bookmarking these pages and checking them regularly to see if anything useful or helpful is coming down the pike. Let's look at Microsoft 365 first. To support one-to-one Teams calls in classified and high security environments, Microsoft is introducing end-to-end call encryption in its clouds for the DoD and GCCH. Now, that's a specific use case, but it illustrates a focus on security across the stack. General availability is planned for March. The next one deals with compliance. There's a lot going on in the roadmap on this front, but this one is in the Microsoft 365 Compliance Center in the Advanced e-discovery category. As teams become more central to the way people work, Microsoft is simplifying the way you pick relevant teams and channels to be included in a case. GA for that one is June. Remote working is a theme across the roadmap as well. I'm highlighting this feature in Outlook that will allow people to specify their working hours and locations with more flexibility to reflect the way a lot of us are working now. Availability for that is June. Now, everybody likes free. There's some new self-service trials for Microsoft Project and Microsoft Visio. Users can explore the capabilities of different subscription plans for a trial experience. This screenshot is another new Teams item. This one was actually released in December. It's a new cut of Microsoft Teams designed and priced specifically for small businesses. Called Teams Essentials, it's $4 per user per month and includes group chat, file sharing, and calendaring, and up to 30 hours of group video calls per month. Let's move over to a few things coming in Azure. Back to the free trials, there's a public preview of Windows Server guest licensing on Azure Stack HCI. Azure Stack HCI, you may be aware, is a strategic product for Microsoft in its hybrid focus. So pricing on this free trial is obviously $0 until GA. And at that point, it'll go up to $23.60 per physical core per month. We've also got a public preview out for Microsoft Defender for containers, which merges capabilities from Azure Defender for Kubernetes and Azure Defender for container registries. There are a lot of Kubernetes-related goodies in the preview, including multi-cloud support for AKS and Amazon EKS, as well as Kubernetes in both on-premises and IaaS environments. A public preview of Azure Key Vault now supports automated key rotation. The intent is end-to-end zero-touch data encryption with customer-managed keys stored in the Azure Key Vault. For those of you looking at or taking advantage of the Microsoft Azure and VMware partnership, the companies have made placement policies generally available. Those policies let you define constraints for running virtual machines in the Azure VMware solution, SDDC. And finally, today, I'll mention something of interest to anyone that's concerned with backup and data protection. That's a public preview of virtual machine restore points. This is a new resource that stores VM configuration and a point-in-time snapshot of managed disks attached to a VM. Those are the things that caught my eye in the near-term roadmaps from Microsoft. I hope they were interesting to you as well. In any event, I highly recommend checking out the roadmaps yourself. You can see the URLs here, although it's probably quicker to just search for Azure Updates or Microsoft 365 Roadmap. Given the rolling nature of Microsoft's release cadence, more interesting stuff is sure to pop up soon. David, back to you.
All right, great presentation, Scott. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. There's always something new coming out from Microsoft, especially from Microsoft 365 and Azure. So it's great to get us up to date for the new year here in 2022 and find out what's going on. I've just brought up a poll question, first poll question of the event today, that says, how important are Microsoft technologies to your business? And I'm curious to see the feedback on this, and I will share the results of this poll here with you in just a moment. If you haven't responded to these polls before, you just do it right there in the slides windows. Select the option that corresponds to you and at your company. And we will have polls throughout the event just to get your feedback, gauge your feedback on the interests around the various solutions that will be presented today on the EcoCast. So thank you in advance for your feedback there on the polls. All right, lots of good feedback coming in. Thank you for your responses. I'm going to go ahead and share the results now. And it looks like kind of a close tie here. 41% said very important. We are primarily a Microsoft shop when it comes to cloud services and data center software. 43% said it's important. Microsoft technologies are a key part of our technology mix. So, 84% roughly of the IT professionals on the EcoCast today say that Microsoft is very important to them in one way or another. So thank you for your feedback on that. And then a second poll question here before I introduce you to our first presenters coming up here on the event in just a moment. The question on the screen is, what's your time frame for adding new or updating existing IT solutions at your company, specifically around, of course, Microsoft technologies, the theme of today's EcoCast. Is it something you're taking action on here in the next 6 months, maybe the next 6 to 12 months, or within the next year, or perhaps the following year, 12 to 24 months, or you're just not sure? I'll give you a moment to respond to that poll as well. All right. Thank you for your feedback there on the poll. We do appreciate your responses. And like I said, we'll have polls after each of today's sessions on the EcoCast. And with that, it's time to get started. I'm excited now to bring in our first presenter. Welcome, Mr. Ted Keitzman, Product Marketing Manager at Duo. Ted, it's great to have you on.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, take it away, Ted.
Thanks so much. Hello, everyone, and thanks for giving me a chance to speak today. I'm really excited to talk to you a little more about passwordless authentication. So this is a pretty big buzzword in the industry at the moment. So I like to do, I'll sort of break down this talk about it into 3 components. One, just talk a little bit more about the technology, so the promise of passwordless, what it really means, what it's not, which I think is important to understand as well, because it's all over the place. Everyone, you should be going passwordless, you should be transitioning to passwordless, also like messaging along those lines. So I just want to start off by grounding us in a couple definitions. But then I'll actually talk to you about, Duo's approach to this and Duo's solution for passwordless authentication when it comes to Microsoft and M365. So, we offer a passwordless access solution to M365 already, and then talk to you a little bit more about, where we see this going in the future. So to kick things off, let's start with that promise of passwordless. Before I do that, I just wanted to take a quick moment and, introduce Duo. I feel like this is important to do. If you've never heard of Duo, although most people have, we are traditionally a multi-factor authentication company that has expanded into providing a variety of other services as well. But you can think of us as our core mission is providing zero trust for the workforce, or providing zero trust security for your workforce, meaning, we want to verify user identities. And so traditionally we had done that with MFA. We're moving into the passwordless space as this is a new form of authentication, but do that for every application in your environment, whether it's a Microsoft application or an on-prem application or any type of a cloud application, a different type of cloud application you might be running. And also, at the same time, we've moved more and more into verifying the health of a device as it accesses those resources as well. And for Duo, that typically means, a posture check around what operating system might be running, does it have the right security features enabled, is there a correct agent present? So thinking about the device as well. So just to lay some foundational information about Duo, this little diagram is really at the core of what we're doing, verifying a user, trying to get them secure access to any application, and also making sure that the device that they're accessing those things from is healthy as well. But let's get a little bit more into passwordless. This next slide, I almost don't need to include in a presentation, but I do anyway, because these problems have been known for a really long time. It's not like they're if you've been working in IT, these are new things. Passwords have a series of issues. They do account for a lot of help desk tickets. It's annoying if you're an end user, me and myself in my daily life, typing them in, remembering them, rotating them, making sure that they're secure enough is pretty annoying. And they're also, perennially, just so many breaches are at the point of compromising those credentials and getting in via that mechanism. So we all know the problems with passwords, but for a long time, there hasn't been a good solution to these problems. We've added MFA, which does help, but the technology is such now that we can start providing passwordless authentication. So what does passwordless authentication promise? Well, it promises to do two things that are usually asymmetrical or inversely correlated. It promises to reduce user friction, so make it easier for users to log in instead of adding friction, or like adding another step, but simultaneously increasing security, so reducing that possibility that there can be credential theft, and it does that via a new technical mechanism where instead of having a shared secret, which is a password, which is your secret stored in your head and also in a database somewhere by the resource you're trying to access, it's an asymmetric key. So I'll get into that a little bit more in a second, but that asymmetric nature of passwordless is really important. So I want to start also by saying what passwordless is not, because this is something that people are doing today. Basically, it's not just removing a password. That would be going from multi-factor authentication, which is a huge compliance requirement, to single-factor authentication. So it's not simply doing this saying, hey, we're going to take the password and move it out of the auth flow. This would be a single-factor, simply something you have, which is not really secure passwordless. What passwordless really is going to be is it needs to be something you are, so it leverages biometrics. And the reason that this is important to note is biometrics are becoming much more prevalent. So Face ID, Touch ID, Windows Hello, to cite a Microsoft version, something you are and something you have. So these are the two factors now. As a quick 101 on authentication, it's typically the three mechanisms to authenticate yourself, then traditionally something you know, something you have, and something you are. And what passwordless authentication is doing is saying we still want two factors, but we want to move them over to the something you are and something you have factors instead of, and remove that something you know factor from the equation. This is nice because it's still two factors, something you are and something you have, but it's done in a single gesture with asymmetric keys. So that this whole authentication happens in one smooth step. It's much easier to perform. I'm going to show you a quick demo of it later. But it's just something to note is this is two factors. It's just as secure as a traditional multi-factor, if not more, because one of the factors in traditional multi-factor is a weak one in that password. But it also is more convenient because you can perform it in one step. So the next portion, I just want to say, why would you choose Duo for using passwordless authentication if there are folks shouting about this from the rooftops? Well, it's simple to try. With Duo, we're including it in an easy addition to try. It's simple to set up. It's easy to deploy and use. So it only takes a couple minutes to configure. I'm going to show you actually some configuration. We'll get a little bit techie here too, just in like what it looks like to configure. And it's a really intuitive user experience for users to enroll and authenticate passwordlessly. And also, Duo has a long-standing tradition of being identity agnostic. So this means, no matter what kind of identity provider you want to bring, will allow you to use passwordless auth. And also, having this really nice use case that we're grounded in MFA. We've provided MFA to a lot of folks for a lot of years. And so in cases where passwordless might not be a fit because they don't have a biometric enabled on their device or their machine, or they can still perform traditional MFA. So we have traditional MFA as an option. They can still get a phone call back, do a push notification. There are all sorts of ways that they can securely authenticate, but we see them moving more seamlessly transitioning over to a passwordless future. We're already getting really nice feedback about this, especially around our user experience. And that's something that we really pride ourselves on, is Duo providing that nice, smooth experience, both for the IT professional in setting up, deploying, and administering, sort of managing the Duo authentication, but also for the end user using a passwordless authentication for the first time. So that's this first chapter I mentioned, which is the promise of passwordless. I'll be happy to take some questions on that at the end if any questions came up about some of the technology. But I want to get more concrete now and talk about configuring passwordless for M365 in a real sense. So it's really simple. It's 2 steps. Set up Duo SSO and enable passwordless authentication. That's it. Duo SSO is a feature that comes with Duo, any edition that you could potentially purchase with Duo. Duo SSO is available. So you can set that up, use any identity provider you'd like, and then once that is configured, you can enable passwordless authentication in your environment. I want to take a couple moments here just to focus on Duo SSO as a mechanism. There are a variety of SSO solutions out there, but for those who don't know, what does SSO even provide? Well, it just means single sign-on, and it federates credentials, your company credentials, those corporate identities, and lets them be used across applications. So it moves it from, this disparate login, you're logging into these different corporate applications, to a simple, streamlined solution where it's just you log in once and you can federate across to those different applications. We see Duo SSO as being really nice both for IT and security because we provide a cloud-based SSO that's fast and easy to set up, and it comes out of the box with our best-of-breed MFA involved, and we make it really easy to do per application policy and all sorts of nice features for you as an IT administrator. For end users, it's really nice because it streamlines their login process. It makes a consistent experience across all of their logins, and it makes it a secure experience across all of their logins. So it's really nice twofold. Again, SSO providing that that ease of setup and ease of use for the security or IT professional, and also that ease of use for an end user. We have a variety of documentation. I'm leaving this here in the deck. The takeaway, these are linked. If you ever want to look into what it would take to set up Duo single sign-on or Duo SSO connected, federated to M365, I can tell you that it's a minutes-long process, potentially hours, but definitely not days or weeks. So it's something that's really simple as far as setting up in your environment goes. But what I'm really here to talk about is, how you actually configure passwordless or enable passwordless authentication. Very simple. It takes just a few minutes. And the other thing that's really nice about it is there are going to be groups of users that passwordless authentication is a great fit for, and we allow you to set policy for that group. So I was talking to a pipeline company the other day. They have workers out in the field and they have office workers. The workers out in the field need to be able to do multi-factor authentication with more traditional means because they're offline and they don't necessarily have a biometric on their device. And so they're doing a traditional MFA, still secure access. The workers in the office, many of them have devices that are equipped with a biometric, and they can perform a passwordless login. And so they're setting up user groups based on that and making sure that certain users can do passwordless, or they're encouraging that to do passwordless, and then other users can use more traditional forms of MFA and still secure their access. This demo, what it shows is that once you've set up, this is the end user experience, and once you've set up passwordless authentication with Duo, it's really nice. Basically, you'll get prompted to enter your username, but that's it. And then what you're asked to do is either do Windows Hello or a Touch ID. Perform that action. You no longer have to enter a password, and you're through. And it's a very secure authentication. It's really quick. It's actually, the video is only 10 seconds long because it's a very quick form of authentication and a very secure form of authentication. And our feedback so far about this has been it's just a godsend to end users who have to authenticate quite a bit during the day. Being able to perform it with just a touch or just a look at a camera is really nice. And again, if you are interested in learning more about setting up passwordless for M365, I've included the links to our documentation here. It's a very thorough explanation of how you can do passwordless for M365. So if you're curious, there's that link there as well. To close things out, I just wanted to talk a little bit about how we see the future of authentication moving, the future of access management. Right now, this is probably pretty standard. In an environment, you've got certain resources over here, certain resources over there, and the most secure way, or at least we hope a lot of people have MFA on that access, although some of these might just have username and password, and a couple of them have MFA kind of thing. Well, in the future, we see it consolidating behind SSO, so federating more and more of those authentication experiences. We do know that there are legacy authentication experiences that don't easily federate, but we see the expansion of things like SAML and OIDC to these more legacy use cases, and we see that added on more and more every day. And we see often with passwordless originally. So it's a reduction on both sides of this equation, where it's reduced the number of auths and reduced the time it takes to auth via passwordless while maintaining that security. And then for us, we see a really important part of that then becoming making sure you trust that device that is accessing passwordlessly. If you're removing that sort of something factor, you really want to explicitly trust any device that you're allowing to do that. So we put device trust in front of the application access as well. And something we're also really interested in is monitoring risk around authentication. That's both pre and post authentication, thinking about changes in user behavior, thinking about signals that we can use to key in on for how to do the right level, how to assess the right level of trust given the level of risk. So this is our final picture, sort of where in the next 2 to 3 years, we're going to start seeing access management move, where you're authenticating with passwordless to a single sign-on, where most of your resources are federated behind it. And then we have that device trust and continuous risk detection in place, making sure that those resources are constantly evaluated and the devices that are accessing those resources are safe. And so I think that's the end of my time, but I'll open it up to questions or comments. And I apologize for a couple of the fumbles on sharing my screen and playing that video demo.
No worries. Yeah, we've got a lot of great questions coming in for you, Ted. While we take those questions, I'll just bring up this poll for everyone out there that says, what additional information would you like about the Duo security solution? So we'll leave that up. We appreciate your feedback there on the poll. And I guess I'll just go ahead and start with this question, which is interesting. They're asking, does this replace Microsoft Authenticator, or you still use that along with Duo, or how does that work?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we have a lot of mutual customers with Microsoft. It can be 1, 2, or 3. Replace, live alongside. Replace or live alongside. Typically, folks choose Duo when they're looking for an authenticator or an authentication solution that works a little bit easier and goes and spreads. I saw that poll at the beginning. Spreads over more applications and resources than just Microsoft. If you're fully a Microsoft shop, so those folks that said that, Microsoft Authenticator is usually a pretty strong solution. If you have a more hybrid environment where there's a little bit of Microsoft here and a variety of other resources over there, then Duo can be a great partner because we can cover those other authentication solutions. And I guess I'll leave it at that. But yeah, we have a variety of mutual customers with Microsoft, so we work together with them all the time. Okay,
excellent. Here's an interesting question from Harvey, who's asking, how do I promote passwordless login to my users? Is this something that, the IT or executives just say, this is how we're going to do it in the future with a policy, or is this something that comes from the bottom up?
I think that's a great question. We've thought about that quite a bit. So great question, Harvey. But there is some wariness of end users. So end users both love the experience when they're allowed to use it because it's just far better, the experience authenticating than using traditional MFA or doing username and password even without the extra step of MFA. But some of them are wary of using a biometric for work. And so one thing with end users, I think, focus on the ease of use, focus on how it's going to make their login better, and also focus on the security education piece where the biometric, the way that they're actually leveraged is they don't get sent to a centralized database. Duo never sees the biometric. It's not something like a password where they're stored centrally and somebody could leak. There's never going to be a breach where thousands of biometrics are leaked, at least from a biometric authentication this way, because the way that it works is the biometric is performed locally on the device. So it's only stored locally on the device. There's no central repository of user biometrics somewhere. So the only way that somebody steals your biometric is they steal your laptop. So that's something just to note too. I think that's a misconception about this, is that they're checking against some central repository, your biometric and the biometric that's stored by Duo or something. And that's not the case. The biometric is always on the device. And I think that's just something to remember. But good question too.
Got it. Okay. Let's see. This is a good question from Chris. Do you feel like the combination of Duo and Zero Trust are the best approach to organization security practices?
Yes, 100%. And Duo, we align with Zero Trust for a particular component. I would never say we check all of your boxes for Zero Trust, but Duo is a great addition to a Zero Trust strategy where we are the access and the workforce component, or making sure that access is Zero Trust because we provide a lot of policy. We can make sure the device is okay. There are other great vendors out there for sort of looking at things like network segmentation and some other core tenets of Zero Trust. But Duo, yes, is a great complement to Zero Trust security.
Got it. Okay. And then a good question from Paul here. Can Duo's passwordless solution fit into a smaller company's remote/hybrid workforce security approach?
Yes, that's actually, I think, one of the things we're better for. Duo has traditionally served smaller companies far better than some, to be honest. Like Microsoft at the Fortune 500, they spend a lot of resources serving that highly corporate customer, and that's great. But Duo has purposely made it easier for somebody who doesn't have the resources, somebody who's a smaller IT team trying to set up authentication. And so I would say yes, that if you have a remote and hybrid situation and you're a smaller company, that's sort of a core customer that Duo is trying to serve, as opposed to, you know, the largest customers. And we serve large customers too, but we definitely have a sweet spot and have traditionally served very well smaller companies that have hybrid infrastructure.
Okay, good. It's good to know that this can help companies of all sizes. We got a great comment here from Chris, who said we've had Duo for 2 years and it's been a great addition. So obviously lots of happy Duo customers out there. I'm afraid we're running out of time though here in our Q&A session. There's I see 26 questions we didn't have time for, so maybe you can get back to some of those folks after the event here. But Ted, it's been great having you on. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
And for more information on Duo Security, check out the Handouts tab. It's there that you'll find the Trusted Access Report, the Road to a Passwordless Future. And of course, you can go to the Duo website and there are trials of the Duo security solution. You can try this out for yourself. So I encourage you to do that. And if you're going to do that or you're interested in doing that, check the box there on the poll that says, would like to try it for myself or would like to get a personal demo. The folks from Duo would love to help you out with that. Make that process as easy as possible. So thank you to everyone who responded there to the poll. I'm going to go ahead and just announce our first Amazon $500 gift card winner now. This is going to Ian Sievert from Illinois. Congratulations. You won an Amazon $500 gift card. Still 2 more gift cards to give out during the event today. So make sure that you stay tuned for those. And of course, don't forget about our best question prizes, a 1 Amazon $50 gift card for each of the 4 sessions on the EcoCast today. All right, and with that, I'm excited now to introduce you to our next presenter on the EcoCast. Welcome to Drew Russell, Technical Product Manager at Rubric. Drew, it's great to have you on. Take it away.
Appreciate everybody taking a few minutes out of their schedule today to jump on our webinar. My name is Drew Russell, and I am part of the Microsoft security practice here at Rubric. I want to spend a few minutes with everybody today talking about Microsoft 365. We're going to cover, what's the high-level landscape look like from 365 these days, and why that translates into more and more of our Rubric customers looking at 365 data protection seriously for probably the first time, since they've been a part of that platform, and then dig a little bit deeper into the architecture aspects of how we protect 365 itself. So let's jump right into it here. Like I said, wanted to cover what does today's Microsoft 365 ecosystem look like. Part of my job is talking to customers across the globe, every industry you can think of, every customer size you can think of, and they're all telling me, almost the exact same thing. Now more than ever, their business critical operations are flowing through Microsoft 365. And by its nature, that means more and more business critical data lives in the 365 ecosystem. And if we look at the stats Microsoft provides around this, it tells the exact same story. Just this exponential growth that they've seen over the last 2 years, with that only increasing with hybrid work kind of being the new de facto standard that's in place, again, kind of across the globe here. The other thing that almost all of our customers are telling us is, they have a very limited last line in defense for this data. And that translates to 74% of the folks surveyed in this case have no data protection in place for this business critical data in 365. And since there is that limited last line of defense and all that business critical important data living in the ecosystem, today's threat groups view Microsoft 365 as a gold mine. And this is a direct quote from some of our partners over at Mandiant. If you're not familiar with Mandiant, they are one of the industry's leading cybersecurity incident response organizations. They're basically who gets called if the Fortune 500s of the world are breached. They go in and determine how that breach happened and then help the customer get back up and running. So these are the folks with the boots on the ground, analyzing real world attack situations. and they're, across the board, they're seeing a plethora of money being spent on understanding Microsoft 365 and then simultaneously how to attack it by these threat groups. That's one of the reasons why it's very easy to go out and find headline after headline, of these external attacks happening, across the board. It's not just one organization experiencing it. It's not just two. 70% plus of organizations have experienced some kind of attack happening in the 365 ecosystem. The other kind of really important thing to remember here, in the overall context of Microsoft 365 data protection is it's not just these external threats you have to keep in mind. It's also these internal situations that can happen, whether it is, a rogue admin going in and, causing havoc, or like this example from KPMG, where they went to apply a retention policy. And if you're not familiar with those, we'll kind of cover those next. They applied that retention policy to 145,000 users accidentally. And, with a click of a button, all of their chat history was deleted. So different situations like that really kind of have to be combined with these external threats that we're seeing in the ecosystem today to really understand, what the overall threat landscape looks like. So the next thing, you have to look at here is, how does Microsoft look at data protection for Microsoft 365, specifically zero trust data security? If you're not familiar with that term, in essence, it means, never trust, always verify. And this slide is, in essence, a copy and paste directly from the Microsoft documentation, where they are focused around complying with legal and regulatory standards. And the way they have that categorized is into these kind of four broad areas. And each of these areas have a multitude of tools underneath it to help achieve these goals. So let's kind of start with the left side here and work our way through the flow here. So first step here is pretty obvious, right? You have to understand what data lives in 365 in order to protect it. Once you understand that data, you can start doing things like apply different protection policies to encrypt it, to restrict access. Once that's in place, the next step is, how do I present that data from being leaked accidentally, or how do I detect different risky behavior on top of that data? And then the last section here is govern your data, where the main goal is to retain the information that you need and then delete the rest. That way it can't be affected in any kind of, situation. And this is really the main area I want to focus on here. This is traditionally where we see our customers focused in terms of a core kind of data protection aspect in terms of backup and recovery. So dig into the govern your data section, right? This is, again, for compliance and regulatory requirements, not for backup recovery. And this is by design for Microsoft. The way they have this broken up is in two kind of broad categories here. So information governance tools and records management tools. Information governance tools are kind of the broadest area here. This is your classic business data that would live in the ecosystem, PowerPoints, PDFs, everything that you use to run your organization on a day in, day out basis. The main goal with the tools under this category is, keep what you need and delete what you don't. Like I said earlier, the concept here being, if the data is not present, it can't be, accessed accidentally. It can't be, deleted by a rogue admin or, some kind of threat actor that got access to your environment. The next section here for records management is really focused around, actually, let me go back here. So the main tool that customers use in this information governance section is retention policies. Vast majority are going to be familiar with these. These are kind of on by default. In essence, what you do is create a policy that says, keep your data for X period of time. After that time period, it passes, delete that data from your ecosystem. And this is all automatically handled on the back end for Microsoft. So really a set and forget tool. All right, so going back to records management here, these are very specific use cases, kind of the diamonds here in the graphic. And the tools around this are very heavily centric around different legal and compliance tools or compliance regulations. And then other kind of very critical business data that can't be affected in some shape or form. The main tools we see customers using in this case is litigation hold. Pretty self-explanatory. What litigation hold is, mark some piece of data as being on hold, once that data is marked, if anything is deleted or modified, a copy is again automatically created on the back end in the 365 ecosystem, so it can be accessed later on if needed. And this is either through, their extensive e-discovery suite that comes part of 365, or exporting it out to the corporate lawyers involved here. All right, so now that we have kind of a high-level understanding of what these native tools are, the question that's really driving all of the conversations today around Microsoft 365 Protection is, what would you do if you're hit by a ransomware attack? Or what would you do if you experienced a rogue admin, or somebody on your internal teams accidentally deleting the business critical files in your ecosystem? And these questions are a top-down question usually. So they're being asked by the C-suite, they're being asked by the board of directors, and then probably just as importantly, or maybe even more importantly, is being asked by the cybersecurity insurance auditors. If you guys haven't had I'll call it the fun of dealing with cybersecurity insurance, the short version here is it is very difficult to get these days because so many payouts have been happening. The rates are just astronomical in this case. So if you're going through and if your company's looking at this insurance or trying to decrease your premiums, the auditors are going through and asking these questions. It's, do you have this business critical data living in 365? And if your Azure environment is compromised, or your Microsoft 365 environment is compromised, what would you do in these cases? So, in order to answer that question right, you kind of have to understand what this threat landscape looks like and how these native tools enable you to recover from there. So what we've seen happening is, it's your core parameters being breached. It's not 365 itself. They have a very, very solid platform in place in terms of their security mechanisms, but that 365 environment is still connected to the rest of your ecosystem. So threat actors can get into your ecosystem through any number of means. Once they have that, we've seen them work their way up the stack to where they can get global admin access. At that point, they obviously have keys to the kingdom, so they can do different things like exfiltrate the data off of your platform, send it to their command and control servers, and then delete that data. Once that happens, you'll get the ransomware note, and then you have to figure out how to get that data back and get it back quickly. So the two options you have in place are to restore from those retention policies that we talked about earlier. In this case, though, they are since they're not designed for backup recovery, they can actually be used as an attack surface to your ecosystem. So like we mentioned earlier from Mandiant and their take on today's threat actors, knowing the Microsoft ecosystem extremely well. They're familiar with these retention policies. They went through, created a new one that said, find any data in the ecosystem that is older than a day old and automatically delete it. And just like that, everything is erased from the ecosystem. The other option here is that litigation hold we talked about. At the end of the day, though, litigation hold is not designed for mass protection. If you kind of think back to the image we had, there was that small subset of those diamonds where Microsoft would apply these litigation holds. At the same time, litigation hold by its nature also nullifies, some of the other aspects of these native tools. Very easy to talk about retention policy here again, where the goal is to remove the data from your ecosystem. That way it can't be compromised. In this case, litigation hold, kind of negates that. The data still lives in your environment in this case. So basically that leaves you with no good options, and you're forced to pay that ransom to have, those threat actors send you back your data to get it back up and running. The other really important part to remember here is it's not just your 365 ecosystem that's being attacked in this case. It's the rest of your cloud workloads. It's the rest of your data center workloads simultaneously being breached and attacked here. So how does Rubric kind of come into play here, and how can we help in these situations? So, the most important aspect of this is being able to create this logical air gap between your Microsoft environment and then the backups that are stored in Rubric. So this is a full SaaS offering. We'll go into a little bit of the details here in a second, but in essence, we reach out to Microsoft 365, pull the data back into Rubric, and then have that fully segmented from your environment. That way, if threat actors do get those global admin credentials, they don't have access to your backups. They can't delete those. So they'll go through and delete your data. But in this case, once you get the ransomware note, if you have Rubric in place, you're able to actually get that data back up and running, since it's in a a fully isolated cloud vault on the Rubric side. At the same time, it's not just being able to recover your Microsoft 365 environment. In this case, it's being able to unify that protection across all your workloads, unify those restoration jobs. That way you can ensure your entire environment is back up and running. The really important part to kind of out here too, this isn't a Rubric versus Microsoft story. And in fact, it's quite literally the exact opposite. Microsoft has an amazing suite of tools focused around compliance. Our customers use them on a regular basis, and more importantly, they use them in tandem with what Rubric brings to the table. So the overall recommendation, right, is to leverage everything Microsoft has in place. Identify your data, restrict the access, have the encryption in place. But what Rubric does is allow you to protect from those external and internal threats that we mentioned earlier, and do it in a way that is fully automated from a management perspective, and then being able to get as granular as needed from the restoration jobs, and then do that in bulk. So worst case scenario happens, your entire 365 ecosystem is blown away from a data perspective. There's all the business critical data that you need to get back up and running. So Rubric allows you to do that in an easy to manage fashion. And that's exactly why probably, I don't know, a month and a half, 2 months ago, we announced that Microsoft took an equity stake in Rubric, specifically around a kind of core joint mission statement up here, right, up on the left, I should say, all around being able to take the concept of zero trust data security and apply it to each of our joint customers. And really all that is being driven around 2021's main imperative of ransomware. And this is, like we talked about earlier, it's a C-suite level conversation. It's a board level, top of mind across the board. So, this investment from, Microsoft allows us to do a whole bunch of things on the back end, in terms of ensuring we have adequate protection in place, leveraging their engineering resources, their product management teams to make sure, the joint products we have in place meet their standards, meet the Rubric standards, and allow our customers to have a holistic data protection solution, for any kind of internal, external threat scenarios. So the fun part here, how does it work? So first and foremost, security is top of mind when we design the solution. So if we work our way through the stack here, start with being able to authenticate into your Microsoft 365 ecosystem. All of this is done through what Microsoft calls modern authentication. It's their implementation of OAuth. What that means is we never have access to your credentials. Microsoft gives us a one-time access token, and then from there, we'll create what are called enterprise applications to enable our API access into the 365 ecosystem. And then those enterprise applications are scoped specifically to the API permissions we need. Once we have those in place, we'll reach out to 365, like I said, ingest that data into the Rubric platform, all fully encrypted at flight, and then land that data in a Rubric cloud vault that is also fully encrypted. The important aspect here is that this is fully isolated from your environment. If you're 365 or Azure or really your main environment is compromised, these backups are secured in a Rubric controlled instance. Once that initial configuration is placed, you can take our SLA policies and apply those to each of the high-level applications. So think of applying an SLA policy to OneDrive, to SharePoint, Exchange. That way you have a base level of protection in place. And I guess to take a step back here too, if you're not familiar with the SLA policies, what they allow you to do is define your business use case and logic for backups. Take a backup every 4 hours, keep it for 30 days. Take a backup for a month, keep that for a year, and just kind of automatically handle that on the back end. You can also get down to the individual user level and get as granular as you want to with these SLA policies. That way you can ensure your VIPs, your top priority users, have a more frequent backup frequency than maybe the intern who started yesterday. When talking about Microsoft 365 protection, the most important aspect to remember here is it's an extremely complex API system that we have to work with here. If I relate this back to the on-prem world and taking like a VMware snapshot, we'll call the specific API for snapshot and then ingest the data into Rubric. There's no equivalent of a snapshot API in Microsoft 365. So there is 4 or 5 different APIs that we leverage on the back end. The main one being Microsoft Graph. Microsoft Graph allows us to talk to the individual applications through a single endpoint. But then each of those individual applications also have a specific API dedicated to them. So there's a OneDrive API, an Exchange API, etc. And each of these APIs have their pros and cons. So which one works best in situation A, which one works best in situation B, and at the same time, what happens if these API fails? They're used by something like 300 million users across the globe. So it's not a matter of if the API will fail, it's a matter of when. So how do we automatically handle those failures transparently and ensure that we are always ingesting your data according to the SLA you defined as part of your protection policy? The other really important part here is eking out the performance of these Microsoft APIs. So, since they are globally available, Microsoft does an amazing job of, maybe amazing job, not the best way to describe it, but they very, very heavily throttle these APIs. If we're talking to a single connection point in a 365, we can hit those throttling limits almost instantaneously. Which is exactly why our approach is to load balance our connections into the 365 ecosystem across multiple enterprise applications. And if you remember, the enterprise applications are how we have API access into 365. So we're able to achieve an industry leading level of performance to get your data back as quickly as possible here. The other part to kind of keep in mind here too is the underlying architecture plays a pretty important role in this as well. So under the covers, we're using the Azure Kubernetes service to dynamically scale up our compute workloads to meet your demand. So, for example, if you're taking a snapshot, we'll create a new container, or if you're doing a new restore job, create another container, and we can automatically scale those up to whatever whatever limits we need to ensure we're meeting your performance and reliability expectations. And at the same time, all of this applies to the rest of your ecosystem, whether it is in Azure or in your data center with vSphere. You can take these same SLA policies and apply them to those workloads as well, and then utilize the Rubric players interface here, which is our SaaS-based application, to manage the recovery of those workloads in the event of an attack. So that's all I really wanted to cover today. The main goal was to make sure you have an understanding of what today's ecosystem looks like for 365, both in terms of its overall usage and what the threat landscape looks like for that, and how Rubric and Microsoft have joined together to offer a solution that allows you to take advantage of best of both worlds: the native tools from Microsoft that are focused around compliance and regulatory issues, and then the core backup and recovery that Rubric offers to protect you from internal and external threats. The other thing too is we're going to, I know we talked about doing a demo here. We actually have a new guided workthrough that we're going to send out as a leave behind here. You can get hands-on access to the player's interface and walk through a demo yourself. In my opinion, it's way easier to understand that ecosystem by clicking through and getting actual hands-on time. So we will send that out here after the webinar as well. So appreciate everybody's time today. And I am in chat here if you guys have any questions. So please feel free to throw those out.
All right, great presentation, Drew. Thank you so much. We do have a lot of great questions coming in for you. We'll be routing those to Drew electronically. Like he said, he is in the chat, responding to your questions as quickly as he can. I've just brought up the poll question out there on the screen that says, what additional information would you like about the Rubric solution? And of course, we appreciate your feedback there on the poll. I can tell by the volume of questions that have come in here for Rubric that there's a lot of interest, of course, around the Rubric solution and what it can do to help better protect your Microsoft 365 and Azure cloud environments. So I'll leave up the poll, and we'll go ahead and do the drawing now for our next Amazon $500 prize winner. So we've got a gift card here. Let's see, this one is going to Jim McCartney from Indiana. Congratulations. Jim McCartney from Indiana will reach out to deliver your prize. Of course, if you'd like to donate it to charity as well, we would love to help you do that. And I'll leave up the poll here for just another moment. Let everyone respond. If you haven't responded yet, we do appreciate your feedback. And with that, I'm excited now to introduce you to our next presenter on today's EcoCast. Welcome, Edward Watson, Senior Global Product Marketing Manager at Veeam. Edward, it's great to have you back on.
Yeah, thank you, David. So I'm very, very excited, and congrats to Lucky Winner as well. So, we've said goodbye to 2021. We're welcoming in now 2022. And for many of us, it's time to look at, what are the applications in my environment that really, I haven't really been protecting before. And for many of us, it's yet at protecting. So hopefully what I'm about to do with this presentation is maybe give a few pointers on what to look for as you evaluate Office 365 backup vendors. And maybe even if you're already protecting Office 365, give you some just advice on how to augment your existing strategy. But before we get into the checklist, let's get into a few data points. So it's pretty clear that the risks exist, right? This is a survey that we conducted at Veeam Software, and one of the primary questions that we asked was, what are the reasons you're looking at protecting this data? And you can see things like accidental deletion was, coming up on the list. Preparation against cyber attacks, other interesting things such as, I need better restoration capabilities. Give me something that's going to allow me some granularity, more than what Office 365 actually provides. Maybe I have various compliance needs where I need to quickly find and search and recover this file or document that my HR or compliance officer needs, like yesterday, or even just needing more centralized and simplified restore capabilities. Or maybe I've got a migration process that I really need maybe a simple backup solution to aid in that process. So you can see SaaS admins, backup admins largely, agree when it comes to a lot of these primary reasons. On the next slide here, we still see that in the question asked, how does your organization back up Office 365 today, 2020 versus 2021? We got some interesting findings, and one of the more scary facts was 55% of businesses are left unprotected. But the silver lining, to not disregard the silver lining here, we use a third-party backup product or service for O365 grew from around 30% up to 45%. So there's definitely many organizations that are now finally the light bulbs coming on. Yes, I do need to protect this data, and I'm making an effort to do so. We do not actively back up Office 365. You can see that actually went up 4 percentage points, probably because now the people who say we use only the built-in solutions now realize that's actually not a backup solution and realize, they admit we do not actively actually back up this data. And, this data is being held on for longer and longer periods of time. You can see here some of the data retention mandates for organizations, up to 3 years for most, up to 5 for some for the SaaS and backup admins, even up to 7-9% there for SaaS admins, and even 10% up to 10 years for SaaS admins, and even forever in some cases, 10%. And, with the compliance, various compliance needs growing, requirements growing, and a lot of other factors, we should see this continue to rise in some cases. So definitely making sure we're thinking ahead, protecting this data, and with the ever-changing climates we're in, making sure we're able to hold onto that data for longer and longer periods of time. Very important. So let's dive into the checklist here for 2022. And top of the list, when you're looking at choosing an Office 365 backup vendor is really all about deployment, right? We're starting at the starting point here. Can you deploy this on premises? Can I maybe go in the public cloud, deploy this within maybe the Azure marketplace, maybe in the AWS marketplace, maybe I can leverage IBM Cloud. Do you have partners that I can work with. Maybe I don't want to manage the data myself. Maybe I don't want to manage the backup myself or the restores. Do you have a backup as a service offering as part of this? Do you even have service providers that I can leverage as part of your ecosystem? So these are all very valid questions to ask. But in general, the prerequisites for setting up the solution should be, for the most part, very similar across all of these various deployment models. And of course, the next thing is, well, okay, I can deploy in these clouds or various ways, but where can I actually store this data? What are your options? And for many of us, we're looking at things like object storage, especially if you have kind of a cloud-first strategy. Really object storage allows that infinite capacity, allows you to scale out without having to add disk space. If you have an on-prem environment, maybe we see more of those direct connect repositories. Could be a local disk, directly attached disk-based storage, such as a USB drive. You should be able to leverage whatever type of storage that you want to use. But probably just as important, the type of storage, is having the flexibility to change storage. That's going to be a question you definitely want to ask your third-party backup vendors, is when it comes to actually changing my storage, what are the penalties? What is going to happen? Am I locked into this solution? Because in many cases, that is actually the case. You will see quite a few vendors in the market that will actually force you into using their storage or storage type, and then actually penalizing you when it comes to actually leaving that storage. So definitely make sure that you're asking that question. The next is really, we need to make sure that, especially as our environments grow, and maybe a few of us have a hybrid type environment, making sure that we are able to have a solution that supports that hybrid environment. So rather than backing up just Office 365 or just on-premises separately, make sure that you can actually use a single solution and really back up both of those environments simultaneously. You might actually want to do something like restore an on-premises mailbox to the Office 365 cloud or vice versa. You may just want that degree of flexibility to do that, making sure that you have a streamlined solution. And in some cases, it can be very difficult to detect or predict what type of event can trigger that need for recovery. So again, having your bases covered with a solution that can essentially protect your entire hybrid environment is very, very important. Making sure that you control the scope of a backup. And you'd be surprised actually to hear that there's a few solutions out there when you're creating the scope of your backup, what I actually want to back up, you're not even really sure. You're kind of blind as to every single object and item you're able to back up. You should be able to select to back up whether it's your entire organization, specific users, teams, groups, but in some cases, you may not have the full visibility of what's actually being backed up. In addition, you have to make sure that backup scales, because maybe you have 10,000 users right now. Maybe it's going to grow up to 20,000 users in the next few years. So whatever the case, make sure that your backup solution can handle not only all of the individual items you want to back up granularly, but also make sure that it can scale as your users grow to meet your expectations. Number 5 here is adopt a backup solution built for teams. And we're going to spend just a minute on this because it is quite important. So when it comes to a solution built for teams, what I actually mean is a solution that can essentially tap into the Teams APIs, the APIs that Microsoft have provided. If you want to back up Teams today, you can do so quite easily with a solution that is built for Teams on those APIs, which allow you to back up not just the Teams data within each of the sources below, not just the Exchange Online data, not just the SharePoint Online data or OneDrive for Business data within Teams, but actually the Teams data itself. So when it comes to restores, or when it comes to getting that data back, you already have the ability with the data being backed up on the source side to enable really easy granular restores, whether that's channels and tabs, as well as much more automation frankly. Being able to quickly get that data back in place. You don't have to hunt and find, where did this data reside? No, you know exactly where it resides. And this can be tricky when you think of Teams as an actual abstraction layer that brings data together, making sure that you're backing up Teams the way it's supposed to and getting that granular restoration the way that you need to. So yeah, the Exchange Online, contacts, calendar meetings, for example, the Teams files, tabs, and OneNote saved in SharePoint, and of course, OneDrive for Business chat files. Next is, this may seem like a no-brainer, but make sure you keep your SLAs at the forefront. You might have a specific RPO or RTO in mind. The RPO is going to determine the frequency with which backups are created, determining the maximum amount that you could potentially lose between backups. If you have a backup that perhaps you're backing up every hour, the maximum amount of data you could potentially lose would be an hour. On the RTO standpoint, it's the length of time it will actually take to get back up and running to normal operations. So making sure you're asking the tough questions, can this backup solution actually meet the length of time that I expect to be back up and running? And with a solution like Veeam, we can back up as often as every 5 minutes, which is actually very, very fast compared to many other vendors. So again, make sure that you're asking the tough question, how frequently can I actually back up? What's the maximum amount of time that I can accept to lose if that backup, if I create the backup and something goes wrong. Next, number 7 is another no-brainer, hopefully, but recovery options are very important. And when I say recovery options, I basically mean, we as a business, we have various needs when it comes to getting that data back. It's not just a cookie cutter, I need to restore the data, let's implement a restore. I wish it was as simple as that. But when it comes to our individual business needs, we may want to restore to original locations, new locations. We may want to do overwrites. We may need to save and send. We may need to save objects as files. We may have auditing needs where we need to export items as specific files. We may need to send them as attachments or as MSGs. We may even want self-service restore options for our users. We may want to implement something like a self-service restore portal through a backup vendor, for instance. So we may even want to leverage service providers as part of this solution. So making sure that you have all the restore options that you might need for your individual backup needs and restore needs is very vitally important. So again, ask the tough questions, make sure you're getting into those user guides, if you're evaluating those backup vendors and making sure that you have all of those restore options that you might need available. Next here is using backup to augment e-discovery. So, obviously e-discovery is part of Office 365, but, it can be cumbersome. Using Office 365 backups to actually augment this strategy can be very beneficial, especially if, for instance, in the case of litigation hold, something might have gotten lost or deleted as part of that litigation hold process, and maybe getting that back through the use of a backup is something that you need to make sure that evidence or document is available for that proceeding. You should be able to explore data in 4 key ways, whether it's the backup jobs themselves, whether it's your organizations, loading a restore point created by each backup job in a selected org, or across all your organizations. Even individual point in times, you should be able to load a specific point in time using either a latest available state or a specific point in time. I think those are all very important for you to do in terms of as you're exploring that data. Number 9, and actually this is the final sort of checklist item here, is ease of use really does matter. So, when it comes to backups, they can sometimes be very complex. And in some cases, they may even be so complex that they actually increase the odds of human error occurring. So in general, make sure they're easy to set up, make sure the UI is intuitive, make sure it's going to be low maintenance, make sure it's going to be set it and forget it, and make sure, and in many cases, we might have IT admins that's not, backup is not their speciality. These might be even, people fresh from college, and they have no experience with backup solutions. And we need to make sure that the solution is easy enough so that practically anyone on our staff could use it. And we do see that with solutions like Veeam, where we're able to provide them with a solution that even a beginner in the backup industry can take this solution, and it's highly intuitive, and they can get back up and running really, really quickly when it comes to new adopters. Also, make sure the vendor has plenty of helpful resources, troubleshooting, and has responsive support. Has really quality responsive support that's going to get you through any issues you might have. And again, this is kind of a statistic here, but 58% of data backups fail when restoration is attempted. We saw in the past year, just in terms of across the board in the backup industry. So we definitely make sure you're leveraging a very simple to use solution to make sure that there's no errors that can occur. Now I want to take a few minutes, and I just want to focus on Veeam solution, Veeam Backup for Microsoft Office 365. Really, when it comes to this solution, it's all about eliminating the risk of losing access to this data. Whether that's Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, OneDrive for Business, or even Teams, and really gives you the ability to back up to any location, whether that's on-premises, maybe you have that cloud-first strategy with object storage there, even on-premises object storage as well. We allow you to protect against all of those threats we mentioned at the beginning, the accidental deletions and security threats. We give you many different restore options, actually around 45 is what we have right now in terms of restoration options, and help you meet legal and compliance requirements, really help you get powerful e-discovery to search and find and bring back that individual file or document for your HR or compliance officer. Some difference makers that really make Veeam Backup for Office 365 one of the leaders, one of the primary Office 365 vendors is really, we've spoken about flexibility, but really we offer complete flexibility when it comes to maintaining ownership of the data. And we do that by allowing you to choose really any infrastructure that fits your business needs and really allowing you to change it whenever you need. So maybe you want to leverage AWS this year, maybe it's Azure the next, but whatever the case may be, we let you freely move from one storage to the next very easily, no penalties or storage lock-in. The next point is around customizable backup. Maybe you have a department, a C-level, that you want to back up a few times a day, but maybe there's an HR department or a finance department that perhaps only needs to be backed up every so often. Maybe it's once a week. So being able to establish the appropriate level of protection to different users, different departments or groups, according to the business value of their data, very important, and you can do that all with Veeam. The last point here is around the recovery options, and I did mention we have 45 plus recovery options, and really, again, it's all about restoring in the way that makes the most sense for your specific business. So really, regardless of what kind of data loss that is. Just want to finish up here by saying, don't take my word for it. There's very good forums as well as third-party review sites. We have TrustRadius and G2 Crowd. These are two very independent, sort of raw and unfiltered reviews, as it were. So definitely we encourage you to check out these sites. Veeam Backup for Office 365 you'll find on both of these. And we highly recommend you read all the customer reviews on that. Lastly, I'd like to finish up with feel free to take action here. I've got a few key takeaways here, actually. If you want to get your QR scanners ready, here are some QRs for you to take some scans of right now. So we've got first the Conversational Teams Backup ebook. If you've ever been interested in backing up Microsoft Teams, we highly, highly recommend you to snap this and make sure that you check it out. It's a great book that we wrote together with Microsoft MVP Brian Posey, and is just a really great starter for protecting Teams data. Next is our technical guide on our actual solution, Veeam Backup for Office 365. Talks a lot about the infrastructure components, how to deploy it, how it works, how to create a backup, and really gives you a good idea and really feel for the solution in a very simple way. And the very last is, I really encourage you to see for yourself. You can actually take a free 30-day trial, completely free. So get complete no limitations on capabilities, and again, completely free. And it will revert, once you're done, it will revert back to the community edition. So once this full version is reverted to the community edition, you'll still be able to use the product, 10 users or less, completely free. So if you still want to use this, we highly encourage you to scan this and get started. And with that, I think I'll take any questions if we have any.
Absolutely, yeah. Great presentation, Edward. We do have some questions for you from the audience, and while we take those, I'll just bring up a poll for everyone out there that says, what additional information would you like about Veeam? And I can tell by the great volume here of questions, there's a lot of folks who would like to learn more. So make sure that you respond there on the poll. We do appreciate your feedback. Let's see, first question I wanted to ask you, Edward, that came in, they're wanting to know if Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365, does it run in the cloud, or kind of what's the architecture there?
Sure, yeah. So you can actually deploy within the Azure Marketplace or the AWS Marketplace, or even in the IBM Cloud. And we actually have, I don't really want to get into the specifics, but we actually have documentation online, which I'd encourage you to visit too, that explains in much more detail how that architecturally works.
Got it. Okay. Nice. And then next question, they're asking, can I use Glacier to store my backups?
That's actually a great question, David. And in V6, we will actually be able to allow you to create a backup copy, so an extra copy of the data separately on long-term storage like Glacier or Azure Archive. So this is definitely something that's top of mind and is coming for us.
Nice. Yeah, you all are always releasing new, exciting features, so that's cool. Cool to hear. Next question, can the Veeam product back up a hybrid environment? So you have things running on premises as well as in the cloud, and can Veeam protect that?
Yeah, absolutely, David. So yeah, that's, and you probably saw within the presentation, making sure that you have a streamlined solution across your entire hybrid environment, very important. And we can actually do that with Veeam across on-premises and Office 365 environments. Nice.
And then what about the licensing model or the cost around? There's a couple of questions on that.
Sure, yeah. So it starts at $1.60 per user per month, and it's licensed similar to Microsoft in terms of that per user per month structure. And we do offer some nice discounts between the 3 to 5 year commitment range, up to around 25-30% if you commit for longer terms. So good options there.
Very, very affordable. Another question. What about self-service options?
Yeah, so we actually will have some self-service restore options very soon, in fact. Another V6 question, actually. With V6, we will actually be releasing our self-service restore portal. And that will allow organizations to essentially delegate those restore permissions to users. So we're very excited about that for our customers. We know that's been a huge request from them, so we're excited for those new self-service options.
Nice. And then what's the adoption been of this product? How many organizations out there are using this?
Oh, okay, good question. So actually to date, we have over 25,000 customers of this product. Of course, the Veeam base, the core base is much larger. We have, I think it's up to 300,000 customers in total. But yeah, this Office 365 backup solution currently has 25,000 plus customers.
Wow, very nice. Congratulations. That's awesome.
Thank you.
So if folks want to get started with this, I know you mentioned is there a trial, and then there's also a community edition?
Yeah, absolutely. And even if you try the 30-day free trial, it'll actually revert to that community edition. So you wouldn't have to hunt down that community edition. You can actually go ahead and take the free trial, and that'll simply revert back to that.
Awesome. Yeah, sounds like a great way to get started. Love the idea there of the community edition. So, Edward, I'm afraid that's all the time we have for our live Q&A, but there's a lot more questions there still for you in the electronic queue we didn't have time for. Thank you so much for being on the EcoCast today.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
And for more information, as Edward said, there in the Handouts tab, there's actually a link to that conversational Microsoft Teams backup free ebook that you can download from Microsoft MVP Brian Posey. Just a simple form there, and you can download the free ebook. So make sure that you check that out. Very nice offering there. And then, of course, the free free trial, and then the community edition as well. All right. Thank you to everyone who responded to the poll. If you haven't done so, now is the time to get your response in, because we're moving on to our next presentation. All right, and with that, I'm excited now to introduce you to our next presenter on the EcoCast. Welcome, Dave Russ, Senior Technical Account Manager at Synology. Hey, Dave, it's great to have you on.
Thanks very much. Lovely to be here. Yeah, it's a great Thursday.
Absolutely, yeah. Take it away, Dave.
Sounds great. All right. So, I am Dave Russ, and what I'm going to talk to you about today is backup and recovery for Microsoft 365. So we're going to talk about why and how you can protect your data from cloud services, specifically M365 we're going to talk about today. G Suite is another thing that we are able to back up, but M365 is the focus for today. And once again, I am Dave Russ, and I am a Senior Technical Account Manager at Synology. So I cover a wide variety of topics, and whether it's our hardware or our software, I'm kind of a product expert. So if you are not very familiar with Synology in general, we do data storage, we do backup, and we do a ton more. So basically anything that you can store on a device, we are able to store it there, and then a lot of our software enables you to manage that data and manipulate that data to your heart's content. So we provide a unified hardware and software experience. So in other words, you buy a Synology device and you get our operating system called Disk Station Manager, and you get over 100 applications, once again, that you can use to manage all of that information. So in the presentation today, I am going to talk about why you need to back up your software as a service, understanding the data retention policy a little bit of Microsoft 365 and what is your responsibility. We're going to talk about protecting your data, how to actually do that, and getting started with different solutions for backing up your M365 information. We're going to talk about recovering that lost data, right? It's not enough to just back up the data and have it sit there. You have to be able to actually get that data back if you need to. So yeah, that's the bulk of it. And I want to start off by talking about a vocational college. So this vocational college had 18,000 students and 1,000 faculty that they needed to back up data for. And it was this data for M365. So they had 60,000 email accounts, 30,000 OneDrive accounts, and 10,000 SharePoint sites altogether that they needed to back up. And they really realized that they were using M365 so much more. This is really the catalyst for why they decided they wanted to back up this data. Because it was just getting used so much more, especially during the pandemic when everybody was working remotely and learning remotely, of course. And you might have noticed that there is a discrepancy here. There's 60,000 email accounts, but there's only 18,000 students and 1,000 faculty. And this vocational college actually needed to keep both current and former student data. So that was an important part, and you'll want to think about things like that when you're thinking about scaling and how much storage you're actually going to need at the end of the day. And once again, this college realized that cloud is not a backup. They needed to fill in those gaps in the retention policy, largely related to Microsoft and kind of how they keep the data, but also we'll go into a few more details about why it is important to realize that just having your data up on M365 is not backing it up. So data protection is your responsibility, and that is especially true on a platform like M365. In the kind of middle section here, you can see that the applications on software as a service, that is up to Microsoft, right? They have to keep M365 up and running. They have to keep all of those services going, and they take full responsibility for the uptime of those applications. But up top, you can see that the information and data is entirely up to you. They don't even take partial responsibility for that information and data. So if you're not backing that data up, it is on you. They are not liable. And I'll read you a statement from the terms of service here. Microsoft specifically says, we recommend that you regularly back up your content and data that you store on the services or store using third-party apps and services. So this is really where Synology comes into the mix. So why do you need to back up this data? What's so important? What is the reasoning behind going through all this fuss? Well, you can have files be permanently deleted. So users make mistakes all the time. It is the bane of every IT person's existence. Having users just running around doing whatever they feel like. But they make mistakes. They delete items, they edit items that they shouldn't. So you want to keep items backed up, and you want to keep versions of those items backed up as well. Recovery speed is also a factor here. So, especially when we're talking about keeping local backups of your cloud data, if you have all of this M365 data on a local Synology device and you need to get that data back, you don't have to wait for it to come down from the cloud. You'll just have it locally, and you can very rapidly get that back up and running. And lastly, service downtime. I mean, we just saw a couple of huge Amazon S3 outages. The same thing can happen really to any cloud service. So you get to take a little bit more responsibility for this information by having it local, on-site, and ready to use, whether you have an internet outage or whether the service is just not available. And if you imagine during work hours, if M365 is not available, in a lot of businesses, people are just not going to be able to work. A lot of people work off of M365 out of their inbox, and it just wouldn't be possible otherwise. They wouldn't be able to have access to important emails or invoices or things like that, and they wouldn't potentially be able to collaborate with some OneDrive documents unless they have a local copy. So one option that we have is cloud-to-cloud backup. And the advantages here are that you don't have hardware maintenance. You don't have to manage that hardware on your own. There are less software updates, right? You don't have to mess around with that because it's the responsibility of the service provider. And it's easy to scale capacity, right? You purchase the amount that you need, and if you need more later, you can just push that out and get more. And of course, the other option is cloud to local backups. So you are taking all this cloud data and putting it on a local, hopefully Synology device. And as far as Synology is concerned, there are no subscription or license costs. So this is huge. It's against the industry standard. And the benefit, well, I should say another benefit here is that you get access and privacy control. So the access is really one of the keys for a lot of people where, once again, if there's an outage on M365, you can still have that data locally. You can still use everything that you need to. People can still work. It's such an important factor when you think about how much money gets burned when people are not able to go through their daily activities. And then privacy control can be another big one for, especially specific industries. If it's healthcare, if it's legal firms, if it is student data, for instance, that can be a huge factor in wanting to keep control of that information. So I am happy to say that that vocational college that we were talking about did end up going with a Synology device, and they chose a rack-mounted form factor, 12 bay for their on-prem backup. Now, the software that they used is Active Backup for Microsoft 365. So this is one of those packages that I was talking about within our operating system. And this allowed them to have local backup for their OneDrive for Business, SharePoint Online, and their Exchange Online. And I just want to highlight this fact one more time because it is so important to so many people. This is license-free. You don't have to pay an extra cent. You buy the Synology device, you buy hard drives to go in it, and then you are set. No license, no subscription. You're good. So I want to go ahead and walk through backing up your M365 data. It's one thing to hear me say, hey, it's super easy to use, and it's another thing to actually see me run through it. So I am going to go ahead and share my screen here, and I will assume that you can see my screen, and somebody let me know if that's not the case, but I'll just go ahead and move on as if you can. So Active Backup for Microsoft 365 here is the application. So what we're in right now is Disk Station Manager, or DSM, which is our operating system. So I can just click on this package right here. And when it comes up, we see an overview screen. So we can see all of the protected services up in the top left. So we've got 21 OneDrive accounts, 21 mail accounts. In the top middle here, we can see a backup summary of the last 5 weeks. So this week, we see that we did have a backup. So we had one canceled, so I canceled a backup task, and we had 3 successfully completed. So we can click into this, and we can see exactly what was going on, right? So we had one backup task that was canceled, but we had 2 that were complete. So this is a really nice thing to have, because most of the time what you'll see is it'll be entirely green, and there might be one day where something failed to back up. And you can just click in and quickly see what went wrong and what you need to potentially take action on. In the middle here, we can see our service usage. So we can see that OneDrive is taking up most of our data here. We've got some mail data. And you'll notice that we have some SharePoint data as well. 4.5 gigs of SharePoint data, even though it says we're not backing up any SharePoint sites. And the reason for that is that we retain this data. If you ever backed up SharePoint sites, we're still going to keep that data until the retention period ends for that specific backup. So that's really great to know that your data is protected, even if you make a mistake and you accidentally change the retention policy to lower than you should or something like that. We're still going to keep that data. And then on the right here, lastly, I'll show you that we can see our users, and we can see how much space each of them are taking up. So if somebody's taking up a little bit too much space, they're a data hog, we can give them a talking to, make sure that we get them in line. So I'll go over to our task list here, and you'll see that we have a successfully completed backup task, and this was completed just this morning. And I can click Edit here on this task. And if I go to User, we can see the granular control that we get with backing up specific users, backing up specific services. So what I can do is I can say, hey, I want to back up everyone's Drive account. Or I can say, hey, I want to back up all of the services across this one user. Or, of course, you've got granular control. You can select specific user, specific services. Same idea here with groups. We can back up an entire group across all services, or we can back up specific services across all groups. SharePoint sites are super straightforward. You just check the box if you want to back up the SharePoint site. Not much more to be said there. And the auto discovery service, this is a huge one. Auto discovery service allows you to automatically look for new users, new groups, or new SharePoint sites so that you can automatically start backing up specific data if you create, let's say a new user. You can say, hey, let's back up all of their Drive data and all of their mail data, which is super valuable because you can always back up this data just in case, and then you can go back later and go to the user and go, you know what, I didn't want to actually keep that specific data from them. Let's go ahead and stop backing up the data that we had under those specific users or groups or SharePoint sites. So it's a really great tool at your disposal. And then in our policy tab here, we can either continuously back up. So what that is going to do is look for changes to files in M365 and make live updates, live versions of those new files. You can set it so that you will only back up if you manually click the backup button right up here. Or you can schedule a backup to occur every day, let's say, at a certain time, maybe off hours. Most of the time, I see either continuous or scheduled backups used. And, of course, continuous backup is going to take up a little bit more as far as system resources. So that it should be a consideration, whether you want to just schedule it and run it during off hours. And as far as retention is concerned, we can either keep all versions, or we can pick, let's say we want to keep all of our data for 365 days. We can do that instead. So I will go ahead and cancel and not save those changes because I made some very strange changes. And I will hop back into the presentation here. So once again, now that we've got our data backed up, we need to figure out how to restore it. It's not enough to just have the data sit somewhere and know that you have it. You have to be able to have access to it when you need it. So you can do either bulk or granular restores on your data. You can either restore to M365 or you can export to your local device that you're browsing from. And we do have a self-service recovery portal for users. If you trust your users enough, or if you just want them out of your hair, either way works for us, but you do have that option to give them privileges so that they can restore their own information. I'm going to go ahead and jump right back into another demo here, showing you what the recovery portal looks like. So here we are again. Back in M365, or sorry, back in Disk Station Manager, our operating system. And I'll click on the recovery portal. So this is going to go ahead and load. And I'm going to go to our user, our data hog, John Snow. Here he is. And I'll click OK. And as you can see, we start off in OneDrive here. Down at the bottom, we have a timeline, so we can go back in time to various different periods. We can select specific folders that we want to restore, and we can just click Restore. And we see the exact destination where that restore is going to end up on M365. So I could just click OK here, and it would go ahead and create that. And once again, we have our export option. So if I click export, it's going to open up Windows Explorer, and I'm going to be able to choose where I want to actually export these folders to on my local device. Up in the top right corner, we can choose different services. So let's say I want to go to Mail. There we are. And same idea here. I can go back in time, and you can see we got a few new emails that popped in from between the 29th and the 30th. But we could go back in time. We could select a few items here, and we could restore 2 pieces of mail. And we can either restore this mail to a new folder, or to the original folder and overwrite the existing emails, or we can go the original folder and skip existing emails. So we've got all sorts of options there as far as restoring. And once again, we've got our export option, so we can go to our local device if we want to. Moving on. All right, so we talked about the cloud to local. Now let's talk about cloud to cloud. So the advantages here, once again, are we don't have to maintain our hardware. We don't have to worry about that. And we can easily scale capacity. I mean, that's really one of the biggest reasons that you're going to go with cloud is I don't have to think about it, and I can scale out as far as I want without having to worry too much about the hardware or getting hard drives or things like that. So Synology has a great option for you. It is called Synology C2 Backup. Gives you centralized cloud protection for your M365. So I want to first start out and mention this. This is not going to be the focus, but we provide endpoint backups using C2 Backup as well for Windows PCs and servers. So that's a great choice if you just want to back up devices. You can schedule or use event-based backups, and what I mean by that is let's say you want it so that when a user locks their computer, backup starts on that device. You can do that. If they lock their computer at the end of the day and leave it turned on, that it'll just back up their data once they lock the computer, and then you're good to go. And you can do granular restores, specific files or folders, or full system recovery. So it's great to have that option, be able to restore an entire device if you need to. And more importantly for this presentation, we've got software as a service backup. So this is for Exchange Online, and you can automatically detect new accounts so you can start backing up their data right away. So that's very similar to the auto discovery service that I mentioned in the Synology devices themselves. And you've got, coming soon, we will have a self-service recovery portal for this as well. We do already have it for our devices, the local storage, but we will be coming out with it for C2 Backup as well. All right, and let's take a look at what this looks like. All right. So as you can see, I am logged into my account already, and under the personal computer section, I have my laptop backing up right now. Unfortunately, I don't have a completed backup here, but what you would see here is we would go to More, and we'd be able to click Restore, and we'd be able to browse through and either basically we'd be able to download whatever we want, whether it's, a specific folder, a file, anything like that, and we could go back in time to previous versions. You'll be able to see something very similar when I go into cloud here. The restoration looks very, very much similar, both similar to each other on the cloud, but also similar to what it looks like on our hardware. As you can see, I've got a bunch of users already selected here. Let's say I wanted to add another user. I can go ahead and click Add User. And this is actually going to go into M365. It's going to find our users here. And let's say, sure, I just want to click this user, and I want to click Next. And we're going to use our default policy for backing up this user. I'll click OK. And it's going to add that user to the list. And it says not backed up yet. Everybody else is successful. So they are not backed up yet. And I'm just going to click back up, and then they'll be good to go. So it's going to start backing them up. And while that is running, I'm going to actually click into Jon Snow, sort of our test account here. I'll go to More, and I will click Restore. So we're going to open this up. And this is going to load up, and then it's going to ask for our encryption key. So we're actually decrypting this data because it is kept in an encrypted format up on Synology C2. All right, so I'll put in the encryption key. And here we go. And as you can see in the top right here, we've got our different days. We've got the historical versions of what this looked like from different periods. And then we can choose the different things that we want to restore. We can restore selected mails. And once again, we can either do it to the original folder that it was in. We can choose to overwrite or skip. Or we can go to a restore folder and just create a brand new folder for this purpose. So actually, you know what? Let's go ahead and just click Restore. Starting to restore 2 mails in archive. And then in a moment here, it should pop up again and say successfully restored. There we go. Restoration completed. I can click on See Details, and you can see that I have restored 2 different things today. And it is really that easy. That's all you have to do in order to restore any of this information. So there we are. We talked about going through and either doing a cloud to local backup or cloud to cloud backup, and I showed you our options for both of those. And now I want to hear from you. Do we have any questions that I might be able to respond to? And let me go ahead and go into the Q&A section.
Absolutely, yeah. We do have a number of questions for you. I'm going to bring up this poll for everyone out there that we'll just leave up while we take questions from the audience. It says, what additional information would you like about the Synology solution? And if there's a specific question you want to start off with there, you're welcome to, Dave. But see, one of the ones I was going to ask you here is just around, can this back up Microsoft Teams as well? They're wanting to know.
Gotcha. So Teams is always a tricky topic, you know. So Teams, essentially, we can back up the data, but you know, as far as the conversations are concerned, it doesn't go quite in the format that you might expect. So just beware of that. But it's a very common question that we do get. So yeah, essentially, you know, if someone is sending you know, files over Teams, those are absolutely going to be backed up, but the conversations themselves won't be in kind of conversation format. So I hope that answers that question.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. And then I know Synology has a wide variety of different NAS arrays available. I've got one myself sitting here on the desk. Love it, by the way. This person's asking, what Synology NAS model should I use? Or how do folks generally select the right NAS?
That's a fantastic question. So I almost always recommend you know, reaching out to someone on our sales team. If you're a reseller, especially, you know, and you need help kind of picking those things out for customers, we've got a lot of resources for you. For customers, we do have a NAS selector on our website on Synology.com. That's a great tool that you can use to kind of start out. and you can kind of see, you'll put in how many users you expect to use the device, and potentially how much space you have, and things like that. So that's definitely a great tool to use. You want to think about your expansion and growth over the next 3 to 5 years. That's a very big thing to think about. Most of our devices can expand. So for instance, let's say you get a 2-bay device. One of our 2-bay devices can expand with a 5-bay expansion to allow a ton of extra growth. So that is huge for a lot of people. But what I often recommend is, instead of starting with a 2-bay, if you're already going to put 2 drives in it, you could start with a 4-bay, start with 2 drives in it, and then add drives as you go. We've got some fantastic software that allows you to dynamically expand. So you can start with a RAID 1, you can add a drive and convert it to a RAID 5, and you can add another drive and convert it to a RAID 6 if you wanted to, because our software just allows you to get crazy with it a little bit and not have to completely rebuild an array. It just does all that for you. It takes the thinking out of it. So I hope that answered that question.
Yeah, I like that. A lot of flexibility there. This person's asking, which Microsoft 365 plan does this work with?
That is a great question, and I'm not sure exactly, whether that's in reference to the local or the cloud software. I'd recommend once again checking out our website to look at the specifics, because we do have a few different options as far as the software goes. I don't want to misspeak and give the wrong version. But yeah, our website should have all of the specifics as far as the the versions that you're trying to use it with.
Okay, good info.
Sorry for the kind of non-answer on that one, but I want to make sure I don't overpromise and give the wrong version for some specific software.
Sure, absolutely. And then another question here: what about scalability on the number of accounts that this can protect?
That's a great question. So yeah, that's once again, it depends on between local and the cloud software. For the local, you can basically back up as many users as the device will be able to support as far as the hardware is concerned. So what I mean by that is, you don't want to get a device with a little Celeron processor if you've got 500 plus users. So it's important to look at how much RAM you're putting in the device, depending on the amount of users, to pick out the device with the right CPU. We've got things ranging from Celeron processors, which I'd recommend, for let's say 50 users or so, as sort of a rough maximum, maybe 50 to 100. And then we've got, AMD Ryzen processors that are great for kind of the middle ground, maybe 100 to 200 users, maybe a little bit more than that. And then we've got Intel Xeon processors that range from, quad cores all the way up to, 12 core processors. And so in that range is where you're going to see, between 200 and thousands, absolutely thousands of users.
Wow.
So hopefully that at least partially answered that question.
Absolutely, yeah. Michael's asking, does Synology have a sizing calculator to help me kind of determine how much storage I would need? Yeah. So that NAS selector that I mentioned previously would be a great tool to use in that case. And what I would say is that is a great way to start. I wouldn't just take everything that provides you as kind of gospel. What I would do is use that as a place to start, look at the devices that it's recommending to you, and then kind of go from there and look at maybe whether there are other options with slightly different processors. Personally, I go to our products page, and I just look down and I see, okay, how many drive bays are we going to need?
and then I choose performance once I have the right amount of drive bays. So if you just go to the products page, there's a lot of filtering that you can do to kind of select the right device that's going to work for you. I do want to pick out one question here, which is, does Synology offer enterprise SSD arrays? That's a real quick answer, so I wanted to just grab that one. Yes, we have our Flash Station series, otherwise known as our FS series devices. We just came out with a new one, which is awesome. It's a 1U 12-bay, specifically meant for SSDs, and we've got a whole bunch of other ones that are 24-bay 2U FS devices. So I definitely recommend checking that out once again on our product page.
Okay, excellent. Excellent. Well, I think that's all the time we have for our live Q&A here. There's a number of more technical questions we didn't have time to get to. Maybe you can get back to after the event, Dave. But really
Absolutely.
Great presentation, great demo. It's a lot of fun having Synology on the event, so thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
And for more information, check out the Handouts tab as well out there in your audience console. And there's a resource there entitled Backup and Recovery for Microsoft 365 from Synology that goes into more detail. You can download that now and check it out after the event, of course, as well as all the other handouts that are there, because we're about to wrap up today's EcoCast. If you haven't answered the poll question, I will leave it up for another moment to let you do so while I announce our final Amazon $500 gift card winner. This is going to Robert Oakley of Colorado. Congratulations, Robert Oakley of Colorado. Earlier we announced Jim McCartney of Indiana and Ian Sievert of Illinois. And then we will be contacting our 4 best question prize winners after the event via email to award those 4 best question prizes for the Amazon $50 gift cards as well. So thank you to everyone for all the great questions and great poll responses and feedback on the event today. I will announce the prize winners there in the questions pane as well. To subscribe to the 10 on Tech podcast from Actual Tech Media over in the iTunes store. And then if you are a potential sponsor of an upcoming EcoCast or MegaCast event, reach out to us at connect@actualtechmedia.com. We would love to have you on one of our events to educate the audience here on how you might be able to help them overcome their IT challenges. And speaking of upcoming events, next week we will be having a special education and government IT event talking about how public sector organizations can transform their IT environments, leveraging innovative new technology solutions and cloud-based solutions. That's happening on Tuesday at noon Eastern. If you work for some sort of public sector organization out there, state, local, educational, I hope to see you on that event. Thank you to everyone who joined us on today's IT Decisions Series EcoCast event, talking about the tools that supercharge a Microsoft on-premises or Microsoft 365 Azure cloud environment. I hope that you enjoyed the event and learned a lot. Have a great day, and we'll see you next time.